Hi, I'm Mariah.
And I'm Jody.
And we're Beargrass Thunder.
We are a LLC based out of Smoketown. We do a lot of advocacy work for transit in the city, but also how to bring agriculture into the city, into urban spaces. So it's very important to be able to do this kind of work because agriculture is something that doesn't have to just exist in the East End. We can bring it into the vacant lots around the city. We can bring it into the backyards and front yards of the city, but we have to change some ordinances to allow that to happen.
So we're going to go over a little bit about some of this that's kind of happened here organically in Injustice Square Park, and look at what Breonna's Roots has kind of placed here. We're going to place links below to talk about those organizations in detail, and also how RAF helps collect out of this garden as well.
Our end goal is to be able to save the seeds, at least from some of the plants that are here, and be able to spread that throughout the city so that the sunflowers that are planted next year can all be traced back to one place. So we can tell that story organically, no matter what Metro government does to the park.
Just because this garden's falling into fall doesn't mean that it doesn't have a legacy that it can live on through the seeds that it's about to produce. All right.
So here we have, this is Breonna's Roots. This is the organization of gardeners that tend to the park, and it's really important that we showcase the advocates that are already doing the amazing work that has got this garden to where it is today. We've been able to harvest a lot of crops already that have been able to feed people that didn't exist 4 months ago.
And if I'm not incorrect, all those crops that are harvested are sent down to Feed the West, who works with Change Today, Change Tomorrow, who we've also done a recent interview with if you want to check that out. But, of course, it's my understanding that a lot of this was dying in the early days of the setup of Injustice Square Park. I know that when we visited, the beds were pretty barren, and so Breonna's Roots were the one who came in to take it upon themselves to kind of bring this much life back into these beds that exist here.
And we'll just do a little feature because unfortunately agriculture is not something that's taught in Louisville very much. We have a lot of FFA groups around the state. I'm from rural Kentucky originally, so I was able to bring that knowledge, but what I found out is that most people, especially those that are living in the city, the education about what crops to grow in the city is just not there. So I'm going to just do some plant identification so you can understand. So if you look at this, you can see these leaves are really tiny and they're going all the way up the plant. So when I see this, I know that this is probably a tomato, and you can actually see right here, these are unripe, but any of these little globules, this is probably a cherry tomato plant because the tomatoes aren't big, and cherry tomatoes are really good for the beginning gardener because they grow pretty well in light, a little bit of shade, and if you're just wanting something that you can plant and do a little bit of weeding, no problem. Cherry tomatoes are probably the best bet. They're starting to die back right now because it is starting to get into fall, but look at how many fruits can come from just one plant. And if you can scale this on a neighborhood level, if you can get your whole block to start gardening, then you can just double, triple, quadruple the output of food in your own neighborhood without even having to go to the store.
So as a lazy tomato planter tip, you'll notice that tomatoes often need stakes, or you hear a lot about tomato cages. But if you have a tomato plant that's planted in a nice gallon bucket, you can set them on the side of your porch and let them dangle and kind of grow upside down, and that gives them that support that they would traditionally get from the stake growing upwards.
So if we keep going, we see these sunflowers, and if you notice, the sunflowers, they're starting to seed out. I think these are false sunflowers because we got a little thing in the middle, but every single one of these can start an entire new plant. So if we're able to save the seeds from this, then we can actually spread this to every neighborhood around the city that wants to have seeds from Breonna's Roots and be able to tell that story. That's the most important part.
Jody, do you know what this is?
Oh, this is sweet potatoes.
Sweet potatoes?
Yeah, so sweet potatoes have a gorgeous flower. This is the flower right here. And all of these little heart-shaped leaves, those are the sweet potato vines. Now, if you put sweet potatoes in your lawn, if you just spread them out, eventually you're gonna have a whole lawn maintenance-free full of sweet potato vines. It's really important we talk about lawns too, because code enforcement, depending on where you are in the city, it is very interesting what gardens are considered weeds and what gardens are considered abandoned property. We have found that in Shelby Park alone, there's a couple residents that are trying to fight fines from the city just because they're trying to grow crops. And that would not happen out in the East End. Is it the house flippers that are trying to increase the value of their property by calling code enforcement? Or is it a deliberate way to force people to have to go to the grocery stores instead of trying to grow their own food where they live? And we need to start talking about these ordinances, because unless the ordinances get changed, we're going to have Metro government unfairly come in and fining people just for trying to grow crops on their own property. And that's, you know, if you're a landlord especially and you get calls from the city saying that you're going to get fined because your tenant is abandoning the property, what are you going to do? You're going to call the tenant and say, hey, you need to mow that. Well, how if you
clean it up?
Yeah, and if the tenant doesn't have a lawnmower in the first place, how are they going to mow the grass and avoid those fines in the future? And so you're just setting up this cycle of just endless fines, and it doesn't need to be that way.
You should be able to do with your land what you need to.
The way I like to say it is, like, in Cumberland County, Kentucky, if the government came to a farmer's land and said, hey, you need to only grow grass until you die, that farmer is gonna say, hey, get the hell off my porch. You know, like, I'm gonna feed my family. Why are you trying to come in here? Oh, well, it's about property values. Well, why the hell I need to grow crops? And so we get in the East End, why are people growing 5 acres of grass? You know, you're grass farming right next to the parklands of Floyd's Fork, where all that runoff, you're gonna turn the Floyd's Fork into Beargrass Creek. It's already happened once, and right now we talk about, why are there no birds in downtown? Because all of the water source going in from the J-Town area, from the suburbs, flowing into Beargrass Creek downtown, by the time it gets here, it's so full of lawn chemicals that whenever something drinks it, they get poisoned. So, you know, it's really unfair to talk about, like, oh, we need to protect nature, we need to get a ring of parks around the city, but we never talk about bringing nature and agriculture into the place where the residents already live and have lived for over 2 centuries.
So 2 things I want to interject into Jody's
speech
here, which is good. He touched on a lot of the stuff that we do talk about. Is one, the land development code is up for review over the next 6 months in an unprecedented kind of event. All of it is up for review. So we really have a big opportunity to call our council people and talk about the different codes and ordinances. And we encourage you to look up on Beargrass Thunder, you know, any of that information. And then 2, I want to point out what a good ground cover this sweet potato is, because not only do you have all these nice vines and ground cover that Jody's talking about, look how much it helps kind of these other plants by protecting its roots from the sun.
And what we're finding out from the city is actually spending millions of dollars of taxpayer money every year just to mow grass. And that's considered, you know, in business terms, that's considered a sunk cost, because no matter how many times you mow the grass, nature is going to grow back. And so what I see from Metro is, when I talk to them about, hey, we need to grow agriculture. Well, why would I have agriculture in a suburb? People can just drive to Kroger. Well, if they don't have a car, or if they're too old to drive, or if they're 16 or under, no, they can't drive to Kroger.
There's a lot of issues going on with Kroger too. We suggest that people check out the Bok Choy project.
Oh yeah.
And
Chantrice
Martin and all the work that she's doing with the black market.
Black Market Kentucky.
Black Market Kentucky, thank you. And what they're doing to kind of show the differences between the West End Kroger and the Krogers that are out in the other areas.
And so we're going up here. This is some kale underneath here. Kale is a really great crop because you can just harvest the leaves every single time during the summer. You don't want it to flower because it'll change the taste of the leaves, but they've done a really good job harvesting. And these, where are the peppers at?
I don't know.
Oh, here they are.
There's a lot of this.
We got a ton of peppers. So peppers, they're actually a really interesting plant because they're annuals in Kentucky, because it snows in Kentucky still. So you can't do a frost. But when you look at these leaves, you see that it's kind of like this diamond shape. It has a nice tip to it. And so if you're looking at a plant that has a lot of these diamond-shaped leaves, and especially has these fruits,
or these dainty little
white flowers. And the flowers always grow upside down. But when they get pollinated, you got yourself some chilies. It's right in your backyard. It's amazing. Oh, and this is one of my favorites. So when we're talking about butterflies and bees, a lot of time Metro government spends a lot of taxpayer money for mosquito spraying. And mosquito spraying, for public health, you're trying to combat disease. But when you spray insecticide across an entire neighborhood, not only do the residents have to breathe that, but also you are killing every insect in the neighborhood. So when we're talking about agriculture, what good is planting crops if there are no bees to actually pollinate the flowers? The only way you get food is if you have stuff to pollinate. And so what we're seeing is the government is not only spreading these ordinances to discontinue any kind of agriculture grown in public space or in the front yards for property values, but they also spray insecticide to completely limit the amount of food that could be produced in the urban neighborhoods.
Not to mention all this grass that we're talking about that's everywhere. Sometimes even if you want to learn how to grow in a more urban area or in a disfranchised area especially, there's an absence of those birds, those bees, those butterflies, and the flies themselves actually pollinate a lot of flowers themselves. So we have people that experience disappointment when their plants don't reproduce or their plants don't bloom, and it's really nothing to do with them other than the area itself hasn't attracted all that nature. So it really has to be almost a community effort so that we can start growing all of this together so that our birds and bees visits all of our neighbors.
Every little black seed you see here, this is going to turn into a sunflower seed.
You can see because they're white that they're not like ready yet. What we would traditionally see is a sunflower seed and whatnot, but you know that's where the pollinators come in to touch all of those.
Yeah, every seed you see anywhere in a supermarket, anywhere, it had to start as a flower.
Yes.
And an insect had to pollinate that flower in order for that seed to even get to the grocery store.
Yes,
So,
even things we don't traditionally think as pollinators, bats, flies, like I've mentioned, you know, we love the birds and the bees, wasps, even some plants individually rely on some of these specific pollinators to come and visit them. A butterfly doesn't work for every single plant, a bee doesn't work for every single plant, and a fly doesn't work for every single plant.
we actually have some birds that are eating some of the fallen seeds. And those birds would not have been here if it wasn't for the plants that were planted. We have over 250 different species of birds that fly through Louisville, Kentucky every single year.
And 95% of birds need bugs somewhere in their life cycle to be able to live. Kind of what Jody's saying is don't get rid of your whole lawn, ask yourself how much of your lawn are you using and how much of it could you utilize for maybe something that would take you a little less work and would feed a whole community, which includes all of our insects and our bugs and birds.
We have this basil plant, and the way I know it's basil is it also has one of these diamond-shaped leaves, and when you crush it up, it actually has this very, very distinct smell. A lot of plants you can recognize just on how they smell once you get a little bit more accustomed to it. So I'll cut some off. You can smell it if you'd like.
Yeah, that's when it's all that juice in there. Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a purple variety over there that smells almost completely different. Still basil, but you know, just a different variety.
The thing is that we talk about plants like a tree is a tree is a tree, a sunflower is a sunflower is a sunflower, but really there are thousands of different ways you can grow this plant to actually survive in different temperatures, in different areas, in different shades. And so when we're talking about Louisville, we have this thing called the urban heat index, urban heat island effect, which means that most neighborhoods in the city are surrounded by asphalt. It's 4 to 5 to 6 degrees hotter than it is in the East End. And so what if instead of complaining about it and talking about it like the city says to us, it's like, oh, we need to fix this, and they don't actually do much. What if we actually turn this urban heat island effect into something that every neighborhood in the city center could use as a research hub, where people that are learning how to grow crops in an increasingly hot climate can come to Louisville and come to these urban neighborhoods and learn what varieties of crops grow best in areas that are 6 to 7 degrees warmer than it is out in the east.
I think a lot of us are kind of familiar with that like climate bag. Like maybe if you even buy a pack of seeds at the at the store and you see the little USA and it has the different colors over it, and that tells you which plants should live or should die or make it kind of in those different zones. And
the same seed that is planted in Prospect and the same seed that's planted in Smoketown are going to have completely different yields at the end of fall.
Absolutely.
So this is Tyler Gerth's Memorial Garden, and I'm not sure every plant that is in here, but I can talk about a few. These that look kind of like a Lorax tree off of Dr. Seuss, the ones with the big puffy, these are cosmos.
Yeah.
And so cosmos come in a lot of different colors. They're an ornamental flower. You can't eat them, but they look so pretty once they flower. It looks like from here all the way to the other side here, they've actually mulched and spread wildflower seeds as well as done individual plantings. This is one of my favorites.
That lemon bulb?
Yep, that's a lemon bulb. So if you take a leaf off of this and crush it up.
Let's crush it up, we'll pass it around.
Yeah. And so if you crush it up, it smells exactly like lemons, and it's a citronella smell to it. Some plants are actually really good at keeping insects away, like mosquitoes.
You could rub that on your wrist and behind your ears.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you rub that on your wrist and your neck, it
that
actually
could help
does
with the mosquitoes. Yeah. It smells good too. That's one of my favorites.
And here we see again, we've got these heart-shaped leaves. They're a little lighter green. I know that that's sweet potatoes.
It's so beautiful.
It is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And the leaves and the roots of that are edible. We have Tyler Gerth's Memorial.
Yeah.
It's with these new plans that the city has for redesigning the park, they want to destroy this tree as well as this entire soil place in the center because they say they want to have more room. But really, I think what they're doing is they're going to destroy all of the shade that the park has in the center of the park. They're going to put the C-shaped shade around the side, but really what that's doing is, if it's summer, if it's the middle of summer, and you're going to say that you have this giant no shade zone in the center for more people, how many people are you actually going to have in the park?
Yeah.
You know, it's a nice way of deliberately trying to reduce the amount of people that can actually stay here.
The plans were discussed and kind of put out and developed back in 2018, and I don't think it's hard to see that here in 2020, what we need is way different than what we thought we were going to need back in 2018. And what we definitely need is more nature, more green spaces to enjoy, especially in a downtown area.
And memorials to all of the people that have fallen in this fight.
Permanent memorials.
Permanent memorials. It's really interesting to see how much can actually be created in a space that Metro government 4 months ago basically just wrote this whole place off as a, grass patch? And look at all of the different things that can grow if people take the time. I also want to talk a little bit about non-native, because a lot of the stuff that is currently for sale in Jefferson County are actually, some of them are poisonous to wildlife. If a crop does very well in a place that it was not originated in, then it's called invasive, which means that it'll spread.
Like kudzu.
Yes, yes. Kudzu is native to Japan. It was brought in by the federal government as an erosion control, but what it did was basically it had no natural things that ate kudzu, so therefore it could spread over millions of acres and just completely destroy trees, wildlife, everything. But on a lower scale, we actually have these non-native plants right here. These are ornamental lilies, and you can see them in every single suburb. You can see them anywhere that people want to have a low maintenance plant that they don't have to deal with.
You see them in a lot of city plantings.
Yeah, and so the thing is, do you notice how there are no insect bites on these leaves? That it's just a completely, maintenance-free plant. But what that means is there is nothing in the city in terms of animals that can actually eat the plants that are paid for by our taxes.
If you don't have holes in your plants, there's nothing eating it.
And if there are no bugs, then there are no birds. And so when you're planting all of these stuff that is funded by our taxpayer dollars, and you're cutting down thousands of acres of city-owned grass every single year that you have to pay for next year, basically what you're doing is just completely decimating the wildlife in our county. And we're doing that every year, and we vote on it every year because we want to keep our property values up. And so it's that we need to think about, why are we doing the things we do, because eventually our grandkids are not going to have the same wildlife.
And what kind of value are we talking about when we're talking about value of land? We want to always talk about money and where the money goes and value and everything, but why aren't natives valuable? Why isn't food for your own family grown in your own property valuable? And who's kind of opposing these other forms of value that we can find in our own land?
It's like a white skipper butterfly. A lot of butterflies. There are hundreds of varieties here. We actually have a butterfly right here. You can see that as that butterfly goes from crop to crop to crop, every place he touches, that becomes a seed. And so the more insects we have, the more food we can actually have in our neighborhood. This is David McAtee's memorial. It's really tragic because I believe his nephew just was recently killed as well, just a few days ago. And
Miss Rosie made this for David. She went out and got the grill and all of the things that go with being a barbecue man. YaYa was the best barbecue man in the whole United States, as far as all of us who love it are concerned.
We're just gonna do a quick look around Breonna's memorial and kind of see all of this artwork that has been left here, and see all the great care that's been put into maintaining it day in and day out. So we're just gonna walk a loop around it. If you just guys want to get shots and look at it. Really touched by Breonna's story. I work in I got my doctorate in pharmacy from the University of 2013. I'm working on getting my license.